Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language. Here are your hosts, Mo, Michael, and Tim.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 198. Okay, it's been amazing to be back in person with analytics people, although I feel like I haven't been ready for it, and I feel super tired from all the human interaction, but it's been awesome. So let's get this started. What a pleasure to be here in Las Vegas at Marketing Analytics Summit, recording the podcast live with all of you. I'm very excited. There may be prizes. I'm looking forward to everyone's participation. So let's get started. I'm Michael Helbling. I'm the managing partner of Stacked Analytics. And please join me in welcoming to the stage my two co-hosts. First up, Mo Kiss, marketing data lead at Canva. Come on up, Mo. And of course, the Senior Director of Analytics at Search Discovery, the quintessential analyst, Tim Wilson. All right. Mo and Tim, what a pleasure to be back in person together.
Can we hug?
Let's do a podcast. There's a recurring theme in the classic Australian movie, The Castle, where Daryl Kerrigan is complimenting something his wife has done, and she always brushes it off as commonplace, and he always replies, but it's what you've done with it. Mm-hmm. And often, the work we do in analytics, it's anything but mundane, but how or when we communicate those results, the insights, the recommendations, they really matter. It's what we've done with it. So, live from Las Vegas, we're going to dig into this topic a little bit, and we have been gathering input all week from conference attendees, from social media, from other ideas and conversations. And so we've got a number of topics to bring forward, but we also want to hear from you as well. So as we go through this, we'd love to hear you chime in, ask questions. It's a participatory event.
Heckling is encouraged.
Unless you are a sibling of a co-host, then that's not allowed. So let's get started. All right, Tim, why don't you kick us off with our first topic?
Oh, really?
For delivering results. Yeah, you've got this whole spreadsheet there. You can...
I was not prepared for that.
Oh, we'll just pick one. Oh, you want to start?
I'll start.
Mo will start. Mo was more prepared.
I had a situation recently where I was sharing the results of a particular experiment we'd run. It was honestly the best feedback I've ever had. It was glorious. It was kind of like, oh my gosh, team, this looks amazing. I love how you've communicated the results. I agree with all the recommendations. Full steam ahead. And I was so pumped. And it wasn't until I was walking home later that I was like, I just told that person exactly what they already thought was true. I told them what they expected. So that's a really nice situation, but what the heck am I going to do if the next experiment doesn't align with their personal opinion or their preferences or their worldview? And to be honest, that's why we have this podcast. I have not figured it out yet.
Have you had to do that yet with that person?
No, but it's coming. I know that it's coming, and it's going to be tough.
Don't you feel like you've got credibility, though, because you got to give them the win?
I'm hoping that, yes. But, I mean, it doesn't always work out that way, right? Like, sometimes the first time you're presenting results is you're telling them the thing that they don't expect, and that's really freaking hard.
True.
You're going to weigh in with any advice here, Tim?
Well, it is actually making me realize that, I think it was, if I'm going to go off memory and then find it, but Frederick Werner, one of the, not here, but he had some great thoughts on Twitter. I think it ties into well, certainly don't do it in front of an audience. Like, if you're going to surprise somebody, talk to them first. Like, I don't know, I did this a few times, and it bit me in the ass. And then I've not done it, where it's like, you really don't want the key stakeholder to be surprised in front of their peers, really good or bad. Because really you want to go in and I think it was Frederick had made a comment about a couple of them, not to blow through a couple, because one, he was like, don't surprise them, talk to them ahead of time, and then treat it as, I loved his comment about making it our result. So it's not like you're telling that person, it's the result.
Actually, he said make it their result. And what I found, which is really interesting, so we have this amazing woman who works with us at Kantar and does a lot of our brand research. And it's funny because I noticed when she was presenting back to Canva with results, she always said the word "ow." And it just is this really small tweak of words, but it created this shared commonality about the research they were presenting. And both me and the head of brand marketing really picked up on it, that communicating it as our result, something we're sharing, we're doing together, versus your result or my result, was a really nice way to frame it.
Which has come up in some of the, I think 2 different sessions talked about the whole partnership, and being on the agency and consulting side for a while now, it does start to get under my skin when the biz dev people are saying, we want to be your partners. And I'm like, but you're saying we want to be your partners because we want to be able to sell you more. Whereas I've got some clients where I do feel like I've been able to, I think of myself as an extension to their team. And when we're using we language, when I'm using we language and talking about the client and us, and they're using we language talking about it, I'm like, yeah, this is great. Unfortunately, that the client I'm most thinking about right now, has had high turnover and they've moved on to better things. They're still a client, just the people that we were so with.
We've really reached a low point early in our conversation.
That's right. I can
we're at the resignation stage.
One of the drawbacks of the high turnover rate in our industry. All right, what about in situations where you've got a recommendation and you just have to finally accept that the business isn't ready for what you're recommending? What about stuff like that? Because as analysts, we see a broad cross-section of data and information, but sometimes the organization isn't there.
Yeah, it's really funny. This one I think a lot about, because I think particularly earlier in my career, I would have fought that fight. I would have died on that hill because I was like, but the data says this is the right thing to do. And meanwhile, the business is like, Mo, we're trying to hit a profitability target. No, we're not going to go invest $20 million in this thing over there. We're not going to hit our target. It's a silly recommendation. And I'd be like, but the data says. And the funny thing is, it's actually a really amazing book by Adam Grant called Originals that first got me, I read it probably 4 years ago now, that made me really reassess my thinking on this. He tells this anecdote of an analyst at the Central Intelligence Agency who had this amazing idea that she wanted to revolutionize the way that they worked. And she kind of kept pushing shit uphill and realizing that no one was listening. And she finally just stopped and was like, you know what, I'm just going to put this to bed. She waited 3 or 4 years. She got a bunch of promotions. And then she was like, now, everyone's talking about all this stuff. The climate is right. I'm going to recommend this suggestion again. And it was completely adopted. And I do think there are times when the business isn't ready for it, or it's not the right thing to recommend at that point in time, and you kind of just need to suck it up and pat yourself on the back for knowing better, but just it's not there yet. Does that also,
the other way to look at that is that introducing it, it takes people a while, especially if it's getting them to shift, I've got a couple of specific scenarios where it's like, this doesn't make sense. You can't actually track people that way, so let's look at it this other way. And they're not ready to do it. They're not ready to do an experiment at a DMA level media experiment. So it goes nowhere. And then it comes up again. We're like, again, just taking what the media agency's saying, it's not really what you want. So it may take a year or a year and a half, and then you start hearing the stakeholder kind of say it back as well. So there's part of me feels like there's that balance of not digging your heels in and if you don't do it now, I'm going to take my toys and go home and pitch a fit. I mean, I definitely pitch fits, but...
So you're good at wearing people down, that's the summary?
Well, I mean, I think there is I've had cases where the clients kind of been on a call and they're like, oh, yeah, Tim, you're going to remind me that, that's the case again. And we just chuckle about it and we move on. So it's like, I can show that, no, I'm not going to push you, but I'm good. I'm glad that you're recognizing that now.
And I think related, there are times when maybe they do want to do the thing, but it's not the right time. I have a client right now who they need to hire their own internal analyst now. We've got all kinds of work this analyst could do. It'll help their organization immensely, but they're a startup and they're about to go and ask venture for more money, and right now is not a good time to be adding headcount in tech. That is not a good suggestion right now. That's just not happening. So while we all agree that's a great idea, A, if you can find an analyst in the first place, right? But B, sometimes there's things that creep in that are external to the great ideas we have or the right timing for things that make you have to wait. And that's tricky too, because you have to reevaluate or adjust then what is possible in that scenario a lot of times, because it's sort of like, well, we all agree we want to do it, but maybe it's not the time for it, or we have to wait for the right moment.
The thing that does make me wonder, though, particularly if you're someone that's managing people, how do you manage the team's expectations in that situation of like, hey, you need to let this thing go. We all know that we should be doing this thing, but we're not going to do it. We all need to just suck it up and revisit it in 6 months.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, it's always like the old Bezos disagree and commit kind of idea. It gets a little overplayed, but...
Wait, say it again? Disagree and commit?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're all got to just ride it out, right? It's sort of like, hey, maybe I'm the manager of the team, but guess what? I don't control the purse strings of the company, and I've got to go through the right channels to get the right head count. This is where we are, so let's all pull together and make this happen.
Is there a fine line to tread that you're not like trashing the people who do control it?
I would say I went through a transition in my career where I was definitely like like our team, us versus them, like leadership doesn't understand us. We're going to be our own guerrilla, unit in here, and all we got is each other. What I realized as a leader was that was increasingly unproductive.
Mo, maybe we should stop talking about Helms behind his back so much.
As if you were manageable at any point in time, Tim.
This is now coming to me right now because one of the earlier sessions, so everybody who's just listening to this later, you missed an awesome one from Will Reynolds who his entire session was around asking questions. And I want that list. I want to refer it.
Can I have the list as well? Thank you.
Will's going to tweet the list, but the point, I will now butcher it and watch Will cringe, is that instead of just asking one question, getting the answer, and then having this urge to go and give the response, actually ask more questions, do more probing, force yourself to slow down. And I'm wondering if that's as you're communicating results, if they're resistant instead of just jumping to, well, let me keep trying, trying. Instead, reverse it and actually ask them questions, get information from them.
It's so funny. This actually came up like 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to pat myself on the back because I think I did all right. But we're dealing with a particular stakeholder who has an experience, a lived experience, an anecdote that is very compelling in their mind of, I did this thing and it worked. Therefore, if I do this thing in any other situation, it's going to work again. And it was really funny. We had this analyst in the meeting who kind of just kept trying to argue with him. And I messaged him on the side and was like, whoa, he's like really digging in. Maybe you just take a step back and ask some questions. And it was actually really funny because as we started asking questions, it really did unfurl. And we could kind of be like, well, don't you think if we're going to roll out this strategy to 30 countries, it might be worth a test? And he kind of then was like, oh, maybe we should test it and like not eyeball this dashboard, which is what the intended plan was, which I had convulsions about. And it's funny how that stopping and questioning thing does work.
And Josh, just note for Josh, this is one Mo did not give enough identifying information. You can just leave all of that in. She handled it pretty well. So.
Yeah, it was just a random person.
Good. Yeah. Good job. True, it's happened a couple of times. There have been some edits.
All right, I'm going to bring up one that I consider now actually kind of fun. Early in my career, and I think for a lot of people, when you're asked something by stakeholders to come up with an analysis or an insight that's just not in the data, and actually some of the earlier session talked about this, it's really difficult because you're kind of under the gun, right? It's sort of like, well, you got to come up with something. And so we twist and turn stuff upside down and we try to produce like something. And at this point in my career, I'm actually really delighted to just be like, the data doesn't support what you want to know. Let's talk about another way to get to that answer. But it took a long time. I mean, I realized I was at a dinner when we first got here, and I asked everyone, what was your first marketing analytics summit or eMetrics? And I was the person who'd been to the oldest one, and I was like, how did that happen?
Show off.
Like, I'm just old. I'm really old, okay? But that is something I would love to hear from you two about as well. Like, how has that changed for you?
Elves, do you think that just, I mean, I hate when I say this, that there are things that I just think take time. Like, you getting comfortable enough to be like, actually, the data doesn't support that. Yeah. I think it's very different when you're either a junior analyst or you're starting out your career or you're at a new company and you don't have that credibility yet to sometimes say stuff like that. Like, I feel like, yeah, it's more of a you thing than a stakeholder thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. But if you're a leader, though, of a team, like trying to figure out, like if somebody's really, going through the ringer on some numbers, maybe you can pull them aside or something and be like, hey, don't be afraid to say that the data is not there to support the insight or the analysis we're looking for. I don't know. I agree. I think it's a maturity thing for me, for sure.
I just want to get a show of hands, which Tim can calculate on the fly for the listeners at home. Who uses the shit sandwich method when they're giving bad news?
Okay, that looks like hold on just a second, about 327?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to say about 40%?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
What is the shit sandwich method? Sorry.
Like good news, bad news, good news. Okay. So like you might say to them in the course of the email or the note or whatever, like the data doesn't support that, but you'll be like, oh, but I found this other like nice tidbit and oh, you're doing such a good job at the end. But in the middle, you're like, no, that's not a thing.
But isn't part of that too, though, is getting the stakeholder on your side. Like I wasn't intending to wind up going back to that again, but that idea that it's not the back and forth. I mean, that's the I have watched and I've certainly done it. I have a task, I need to do it. I'm going to keep spinning until I think I can find something. I'm up against the deadline because I said I'd have it by Friday. I've got to find something. Let me just get something, and then I just want to throw it over. I just can't wait to be done with this analysis. And that's like this really unhealthy, because then you want to just throw it over the wall, hope they look at it, answer any questions, and then just move on. And that's like fighting it, and instead saying, here's what I found. I'm not finding what I think you'd like. I don't think I'm going to find what you'd like. I'm happy to continue digging into this. And I think in-house it's... Are you
though? Are you actually happy to keep digging into this?
I am, well, so having the, I guess, in that scenario, the luxury of being on the consulting side and saying, it's your money. Like, I think we've exhausted this. Like, I don't think it's productive. I've demonstrated that I've tried really hard, and I'm trying to give you anything of value that I can. To dig further is going to be costly in time, and I'm happy to do. I am serving at the will of the client, but I think your money is maybe best invested elsewhere, and showing them like I'm trying to be a good steward of their funds, but I'm not. But it's just the facts. I mean, I think analysts, we get into this mode of like, well, in my mind, I thought it was going to take a couple hours. I've been around long enough to know I should at least double that. So I told the stakeholder 4 hours. I'm now 12 hours into it. I can't see my way out of it. Oh my God, failed, it's like, well, okay, maybe your multiplier should be a little higher next time. But being transparent, I think Riesling in her session said, yeah, admit that if it didn't work out, now I'm forgetting the exact anecdote, but it was like, yeah, if there was a mistake or it took longer, I don't know. I just over-indexed to the transparency, and then again saying, we want to collectively get to business value, so let us try to solve this. And I can't make incredibly messy data super clean and easy to get to with the snap of a finger. So.
All right. At this point, I think you're on to the game we're playing. So let's see if any of the 817 people in the crowd here, based on our quick math earlier.
Did you literally
I was like, really?
Punch that in?
Yeah, I did 327 divided by 0.4, and that's got 8.117.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you. They have calculators. Yeah, it's the Common Core, I think. No. Whatever. There's a lot of people in this room. Anybody have ideas or thoughts they wanted to share or questions or... Oh, we've got a hand. All right, perfect. Although I just learned if a woman goes first, I'll encourage more women to go. So consider carefully, Doug.
Okay, Lifebox ticked. I'm on the power hour. This is great. This is awesome. Thanks for having me. I want to go back to the test results, Mo, that you were talking about earlier on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's all upside. There is no downside. If we are talking about winning or losing on a test, or if it doesn't go the way you want, then that's a zero-sum game. And I don't think that's right. I think we are seeking to answer a question, and it is either, yes, you're right, or no, you're not right, but why? And it's the why. It's the understanding of the reason for that result. That's all upside. So we're not going to give bad news and say, sorry, your test tanked. We're going to say, awesome news. We found out some really cool stuff here. And that goes for whether the metric went up, north, or whether it went south. As long as we can say why, then we've got good news to deliver.
So is that, are you putting forth the no test, don't just stop with the results, segment, slice, and drill until you found something? Is that
Yeah. We don't test to improve conversion rate, we test to learn.
I do think that, if you asked me on another day, I would probably say exactly what you just said. I think it's very difficult when there are strongly held personal views about particular marketing channels, particular tactics, and you're trying to challenge that really deeply held belief by being like, look, we did an experiment, we learned something, but you're still wrong. I think it is, I do share your view, but I do think it's more complex than that.
It is. You're right. I absolutely agree in that respect. But in that scenario, with that context, then you make sure the test design and the hypothesis is worded such that we're exploring this deeply held view in order to learn more about it, in order to learn what is the impact of that, what else can we do with it, how else can we turn it into opportunity.
Yes.
I think I still have a little bit of pause when it's the we design the test to answer a binary question with a degree of uncertainty or a degree of certainty, and if we say, well, we answered it but not how we wanted, but the why kind of troubles me a little bit, because getting to why is kind of getting to causation, and there's a degree of saying I ran an experiment and now after the fact I'm going to go wandering through the data. I'm not saying you don't want to dig into it, but the fact is, it's like, I think there's a risk there that setting an expectation that when we run an experiment, we're going to guarantee learnings. It's like, well, your experiment needs to be, what were all the learnings you wanted to get? If you said my experiment was to learn this, and I got a binary, my experiment was to learn whether this looks like it causes a difference or not. And if it doesn't, and now I want to answer why it doesn't, then that can be a slippery slope that you're maybe setting expectations where, well, you may need to do some more experiments. So I think you want to look. I think we have a tendency to sometimes overpromise.
And I'll just add, the funny thing is, if I thought the business was so resistant to a particular result, as in it definitely wouldn't make any changes based off it, I probably wouldn't let the team do the experiment in the first place, because I actually don't think it's valuable in that case. You're wasting resources. You're running an experiment that's going to have no impact. I mean, it would be, I don't know. People are probably going to tell me I'm wrong, but if I genuinely believed that one outcome would just be disregarded, I probably wouldn't do it. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi.
Perfect.
I'm Lexi Keogh. I'm the EWI. Sorry, shouldn't even say EWI. Gosh. I'm so used to introducing myself internally. That's an internal acronym, so I shouldn't have even said that. So I'm actually Lexi Keogh. I'm the tagging and measurement manager at Eli Lilly. And I'm actually going to ask a question on behalf of my newly made friend who was actually wondering, when you're approaching a stakeholder, just on the subject of experiments, you're as business as usual and you're going, okay, well, this is some great information, but how do we even get them to buy into running an experiment? Or does it really have to come from the stakeholder? Because an experiment is really going to lead to learnings to then be able to determine what to do next. But if you're just going to continue business as usual, I mean, what do you do next? So how do you get someone to really buy into an experiment?
I am happy to take this one,
Please
but
do, because I've got a rant that.
Oh, okay. I'll let him get on his soapbox
Nope,
afterwards.
I can.
I actually think it's all culture. And that's a really freaking hard answer. But if you don't have a culture of willingness to experiment in your business, you're screwed. You might find one odd stakeholder that does want to do an experiment, and that's amazing. And I would try and partner up with those people, but it's definitely an organizational thing. And I very rarely pick organizations that don't have experimentation culture.
But is it because they expect that you can get the answers without running an experiment, that they want the insights? Now you're going to have to. Right. Do you work for a 3-letter acronym group within your organization as well that you can?
So my name is Tabitha Carnahan. I work with Cornerstone Building Brands as the digital marketing manager. Primary focus is demand generation, but they've looped in analytics with that. And we work as a center of excellence on my team across all of these different brands in construction materials and exterior building products. So long story short, a lot of what I have come across in my career with this company is an assumption that they already know their audience. And a lot of that comes either from years of experience within the company itself and doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, and or working with strategic partnerships where they come in and say they've done all this research and this is direction you should go in, and then asking another agency to execute on that strategy. So there's a lot at play, and most of the time the biggest challenge is getting them to realize that there's a percent that they might be wrong.
Yeah. One of the questions when Will Reynolds was speaking earlier that he mentioned was, can you think of a time where it didn't work the way you thought it would? And I was like, man, I'm going to use that question so often. And I had, at one point in my career, a time where I was trying to evangelize the idea of doing additional experimentation and testing, and there was no culture of that. And it wasn't that it wasn't really acceptable to just say, I want to run a test on this. But one of the things we did was we just started talking about what we saw as opportunities in experimentation more broadly. And as we got opportunities to test things, then it became a little more okay to discuss the idea of it. And I think my biggest huzzah moment was when we were in a meeting one day and the CMO just turns around and it's like, well, how are we going to A/B test that? And I was like, yes! It's the whole top of the stairs in Philly, Rocky moment. And the freeze frame, credits roll. But sometimes I think you have to take, because I think Mo is absolutely correct. If the culture isn't there to support it, then what you have to do is an oblique attack, right, to come in and start to seed the idea of experimentation into the culture slowly, which is not easy given the position that you described, right, because you're kind of like, well, we got to move right now. It's not like you've got 6 months to sort of plot this out. But sometimes that's the path that you might have to take.
Thank you.
As you describe that, because I'm hearing, I've run into cases where it sounds kind of like that, where there's kind of silos of we're gonna have this group do the research and come up with the strategy, and they'll give us personas and audiences, and then there's the media agency is going to say, well, we can't really give you that attitudinal audiences, but we're going to kind of map it loosely, and we assume their audiences are pure, so now we're going to do this execution. And so everybody along the line says, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to assume that I'm getting perfect information coming in. Yeah, what I'm actually doing is imperfect, but they're handing it to the next group that assumes it is perfect information coming in. I've got a case with a big pharma company where they had done some amazing, clearly very expensive, really good research. They had built like microsites that were interactive, that were amazing, and everybody kind of forgotten about it. So it was kind of the opposite, that they had looked at it at one point, like 3 years ago. Somebody had come along and said, well, based on that, did this really, really crude mapping to how they were going to segment their database, and they've been moving along with it with labels that came from that research. And I started asking, like, this came from somewhere. Can we find where it came from? And I pulled it up, and I was like, well, wait a minute. There are so many testable ideas in this. Like, can we pull this back up? Because there's this tendency to always want to have, like, what's new? And it's like, well, they did this. You spent 5 or 6, easily 6 figures on this research, and it seemed solid. But it was like, okay, but we never actually tested it. Like, you ran 70 meters down the race, and you're set up, and then you just kind of, everybody walked off and went home. So that wound up being another little bit of a steady drip of saying, we found this other thing. Aren't you excited about this? The brand managers had turned over internally, so we were pulling stuff up for them saying, do you realize that your predecessor commissioned this and it seems awesome? And then asking them questions. Why are we not still looking at that? And then that ultimately did lead to some tests.
So I've got one burning in the back of my mind. Advice welcome.
Wait, a what?
I'm going to say it now, Tim.
Okay.
We're getting there. I've had a situation recently, and I think at every data person has gone through this in their career at some point, where people are completely resistant, not to the findings, but the tool that was used. So I'm not going to listen to you because it came from Google Analytics, or because it came from Adobe Analytics, or because it came from finance and old mate, whatever his name. Like, it's the tool and how we found the information that is not believable. And I actually find that incredibly challenging. Like, the thing that I've been thinking about recently is like, what if I just obfuscate where the data came from so that they don't know, and make it look like it came from the thing that they like, and then maybe they'll just believe it and it will all go away. That was in my head. I haven't actually tried it, but I've been considering it. Judging by the laughter, I probably shouldn't do it.
Well, you probably shouldn't talk about it on a podcast, that's for sure.
Well, but I think there's a part of it, and I think Corey Underwood had chimed in with this one. It's like you do need to know the tool really well and know the data. Like, you need to know that. I think be able to defend the tool's not the right, explain. Like, there's the danger of getting sucked into, we're trying to have a meeting about a strategic, important thing, and somehow we've been derailed with how cookie expiration happens. So that's like the slippery slope to not head down. But I do think you need to know it and then somewhat defend the tool set that you have, but I think includes saying these are the limitations. I acknowledge these are the limitations, but I don't know. But if somebody's going to bash a tool, like...
to be honest, I'm at that point where I'm like, you know what? Let's just not use that tool. Like, if that is going to be the friction point to doing or making the best decision, maybe we just use a different freaking tool. And like, again, not my hill to die on, but I don't know.
So I want to address that. This is Jim Stern. I run a little conference called Marketing Analytics Summit, and also Life Goal. I'm on the Analytics Power Hour. So in the legal world, they say that you attack the facts, and if you can't attack the facts, then you use the law, and if you can't use the law, then you go after the personality of the person. So when somebody says the tool isn't trustworthy, you have to figure out why they're discounting your results, because that's just an excuse. They're just hiding because probably they have no idea how trustworthy the data is.
But still challenging, right? That can still derail the discussion, and maybe that is the like, I understand you have some concerns. I will set up time with you after this to go through the concerns. Can we, for now, on the premise that the tool's okay, or say, you know what, if you don't, we'll have to have that separately. I'm sorry we have all 8 of you here today. We'll reschedule for next week. I mean, that would be brutal. I've never pulled that off. Said just, well, you know what, let's end the meeting. Fine.
So
if you're going to be an asshole, I just went straight to the personality
take
part.
your toys and go home?
Well, no, but I mean, more say, I don't want a public, because I mean, that is the kiss of death, like having a discussion about the data and the data source when that's not the, which some of that goes back to pre-selling. If you know that person is going to be like, quantum metric, that's horrible, you know, and it's like, okay, well, what can I, if I know that person has got animosity towards it, then I've got to do the painful, which I am terrible, because I don't want to go have the like, okay, I'm going to set up the one-on-one, I'm going to talk this through, and I'm going to try to do it ahead of time, and at least say, I want to make sure that what I'm saying we're both comfortable with. So that means if I'm going to give and say, I won't say that, or I'll say it this, and try to get them vested and on your team.
Or as Jim Stern recommends, impugn their character.
I think.
All right,
I like
we've
that.
got another question.
Oh no, I was going to make a comment about
Great.
your issue. So, Lexi Keogh here again from Eli Lilly. When we all started working from home, everyone was like, "Well, the data is now different because we're going to have so many people working from home. We can't filter everybody's IP address from home." And I was like, I get it. However, here are some stipulations around that. Obviously, most of those people are going to be visiting the site directly because you don't need to be Google searching for us. Hopefully not. Hopefully you're not clicking on our ads, on our own ads, and driving up PPC. So I think my best guess and what I went around doing is gathering concerns and understanding what the concerns about the tool were prior to then delivering any report. And that goes for both Google Analytics currently and then Adobe, because we had some fun issues when implementing Adobe that were different from Google Analytics. So then right now, super fun. Get to cross-reference between GA4, GA360, and Adobe and kind of give like, I know. Yeah.
A classic.
Only do that for a couple of brands, but really kind of giving them that high-level view and going, here's what I understand are the kind of issues between all those tools and all the stakeholders that have raised their concerns, and here's still my recommendation and my understanding behind the data. And it still would be the same no matter if we took those stipulations on or not. So same recommendation, and I can still have a one-on-one with you later to go through the data and your own concerns, but definitely pre-gathering those concerns. I mean, that's definitely a lot of effort, but that's the best way I've handled it so far.
I love that you're giving me advice that I would give someone else, but I still need to hear it from you, and I'm shaking my head being like, that's a great idea. I really need to gather concerns.
But I will say, like, little pet peeve, because there are analysts who love to do the IP, we're doing the IP address filtering, and I would sometimes recommend math, especially if you're a brand that has massive reach that, as an analyst, it's like, oh, how can I solve that? Well, I can have an intranet site and they come to this and they drop it. Or I can say, if our employees are hitting the site in such volume that that's meaningfully impacting what we're seeing, we have a much bigger problem than not filtering out our internal traffic. But I mean, I know like there's this tendency to say we've got this clever way to filter out, but there's the danger of that is starting to pretend that there's precision in the data that there isn't. So,
hi guys and gals. I'm Barb Kalickia. I work for Publicis Sapient as a manager of data strategy, and I wanted to add on to everything everybody is saying. What I usually do, I came across that a lot, especially with our fabulous Google Optimize that we use sometimes. You know, I had a statistical analysis discussion about statistics and how statistics are statistically reliable because of one or two things, and decided that that route was not getting me anywhere because everybody was glazing over, like, you know, kind of like you guys are like, oh my gosh, just talking about statistics. So basically what I just say is it's not meant to be like a one-to-one relational tool. It's meant to give you a direction to further experimentation and or create more experiments, different experiments out of what you're seeing. Also, that directional tool, if you're going to change the CTA of an add to cart button, it's not going to matter, because if somebody's going to buy it, they're going to add it to the cart anyway. So I always, especially Google Analytics, always, don't worry about it if the employees are coming in directly, because it's just a way to kind of take your marketing or your campaigns or whatever ad spend you're doing and use it as a directional way to show you how to get to the ROI you want.
But it does trigger the challenge we all have, and I think a lot of us have to, I've had to kind of slowly overcome it myself, that 20 years ago we started thinking that digital was going to give us this level of precision and fidelity that it never was going to give us. Now it's getting worse, and there's plenty of consultancies and vendors saying we've got technical workarounds that are expensive and hard, and they're going to get you back to some truth. And it's like there was just that big fallacy. Jim Genolio talked about it a little bit yesterday as well, that it was never that great, but we kind of let marketers get conditioned to think that because they see a very, very precise number, we actually think it's very accurate.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to switch.
Quick question, and it goes to filtering. I have a mentee who listens to your podcast who joined a new organization, and they do not filter bots, which they feel, this particular person feels, is about 30% of the traffic. How bad is that? Is that a hill to die on?
I'd worry a lot more about the bots. Boy, you just want to take that? I try to talk less.
I'm confused by, does this person have to die on a hill for this? I've had this problem in companies before, and most people are like, yeah, sure, we should fix that. That's probably a thing we should fix. But it seems like maybe there is resistance, and that's why it's a discussion about whether they need to go up the hill.
The response is, yeah, we recognize that's a problem, but it's not a priority, so back down. Don't harp on that anymore. We're tired of hearing it.
Yeah, so there's an indication in there, like how important is data to the success of the organization. And then as a result of that, they'll have to make a judgment call about their role with the data and the organization and whether the organization is worthy of their time. And that's a great place to be as an analyst in this modern time, where you can maybe talk to some other organizations about whether they value you and their data.
So
more.
It's a hill to die on.
Potentially.
If you get the bots there are bots on the website, and there are bots that are false impressions, false clicks. There's media they're paying for that is streaming media for devices that are turned off. I would go and die on the hill of bots in your paid media and trying to find evidence of, if there are bots on the website and those bots are showing up as coming from paid media, then their agency or their internal team is reporting a grossly misleading cost per click or CPM, and going back and saying, if this is the issue we have on our website, let's just apply that number to our media. You think you're pretty comfortable, you think you're below a benchmark for CPM. What if we actually factored in this bot thing? You are throwing money away.
And to be honest, when I do that, I often extrapolate out to a year, because sometimes if you do like a day or a week, people are like, yeah, whatever. But if you do it for a year, it's like, that's the money you're wasting. And I don't know, maybe that's messed up and I shouldn't do that because it's manipulative, but it's worked well.
Wait, we're analysts. That's what we do with data.
Sure.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Again, you didn't name the role that you were deceiving, so
No.
Josh doesn't have to edit that out either.
So I want to open up another little line of topic. So there's two things that no one ever seems that interested in measuring. One is success. I want to talk about that. The other is the metaverse currently, because it's new and exciting. But no, when things go really well, a lot of times there's not a lot of people don't want you to go into a big retrospective on it, or they don't care very much. I don't know. How do you communicate?
Don't.
Just don't?
You plan to do X, you did X.
But what if there's two things I always think about. There's how do we maximize efficiency, and how do we make big bigger? So, like, if something's working well, shouldn't I analyze it to make...
Yeah, look, I work at a company that's very enthusiastic and positive. So, like, good news is exciting. Like, yeah, for me, it's actually the inverse. I find it harder to be like, how are we going to communicate something didn't go well than something did? Because they're all like, give me the hype reel. Everyone's really pumped. There's, like, music made, and it goes along with the slides. So I definitely have the opposite problem.
But we don't have infinite resources. I mean, there is no world where we can just analyze everything. So I push because
Actually,
there is a world where we can.
No, but I'm going to give you an example of where we did.
Analyzed everything?
No. So actually, we had some very good increases, which again, you might just be like, oh, cool, hypergrowth company, doing really well, growth, yay. But what we really wanted to understand as a data team was this actually growth attributed to things we were doing, or was it COVID? And I do think that is worth an analyst researching, and we did.
But that's still starting. You just articulated a hypothesis of, wait a minute, let's not, because right now we're in a point where lots of companies just said, we're doing great, let's keep projecting that, and all of a sudden things are not going well for them. So to me, that's a very specific, we framed a hypothesis, which is very different from saying, this was really successful, can you just analyze why? Like, they just analyze...
But wouldn't you, in analyzing why, have to come up with a hypothesis? Like, isn't that the step you would take?
Well,
like, okay, hypothetically, not hypothetically, this actually happens. I used to have an exec that I worked with. If I had any graph that just went kind of like that, they would flip out. And the first question would be why.
Home, Mo just gestured a elbow pointing down.
So a graph that just goes off a cliff, right? And I always had to know why, or have a good indication or a timeline of the answer before I met with this person, because that was the first question. The same should happen when the graph is going up. Like, apparently not.
I did not know we were going to run into disagreement on this one. Very exciting.
Should we go to a vote? Should we go to an audience vote?
But I'm still questioning the framing a little bit. Like, if you're doing a campaign or doing something and saying we're expecting this to drive growth, drive things to go up, and it goes up. If you're saying we're doing nothing and it just surprisingly went up or surprisingly went down, Google has that horrible, awful, they're on iteration number 2 or 3 of, we'll give you, what's it called? Anybody? Intelligent Insights or automated? I don't know what it's called. It is go read that. Like, go look at what that is, and you'll be like, this is absolute garbage. Traffic revenue has gone up in California by 27%, while revenue overall went up by 10%. And that is the path you can get yourself sucked down. Like, there's only so many hours in the day.
So you're worried about more just going down a rabbit hole without a clear direction. I about lost my mind when there was when Adobe Analytics rolled out anomaly detection, and there was a thought leader who was like, congratulations, analysts their job just got so much easier and wrote a lengthy blog post. The analyst can come in the morning, pull up, see what their anomalies were, and then dig into every anomaly and figure out the why behind every anomaly. And this person kind of said that is the role of an analyst. Well, if you say basic 95% outside of a level is an anomaly, you look at 100 things, you're going to find 5 anomalies, right? So yeah, I mean, so but
point
isn't this
taken.
why
If it
all
goes
analysts
way
have
up,
spidey senses?
well, but if you've got a stakeholder who says if it goes up or down, it always goes up or down. I think one time in my life that I've seen a number stay perfectly
versus
flat.
Your expectation versus your target, like
versus the normal variability in the data, right? I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
That's what I meant.
So this is good, because I think the hypothesis as part of the process, I think, is really a good idea and healthy, and I like both those things. Okay,
it's be the last episode. This is where
that's right. We're gonna die on this hill, as has been spoken before.
Almost to 200.
I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because we're about to ramp up a little bit. But I think one of the questions that was submitted by someone attending the conference is, what is your best piece of advice for new analysts who are looking to make a difference in the field? And I liked the question, and I thought I'd ask you and Mo, Tim, what advice would you give?
It depends how they define difference in the field. Because when I hear difference in the field, I think about the community, and that's always actually been really important to me when I started out in data. Actually, many of the people that are in this room helped me out. They would get on Zooms with me. They would talk me through technical hurdles. And so for me, when I talk about making a difference, I try and give back to other new people starting out in the industry, whether that's through like a meetup or a conference or like mentorship, because that's the thing that drives me. But difference in the community can also be like contributing to open source code and things like that. So I think this person needs to figure out of like, what is the difference they want to make? Do they mean within their own role, which is very different to, like if they want to have an impact on other people within the data space.
I like that. It's like you shouldn't be trying to make one difference. Like you should be probably pursuing a few. Well, no, I mean, to your point, right?
Sure,
I mean, if you say I want to have a singular focus, but I will, Cassie Kozrakov, who I think we all kind of admire, at least the three of us, but she did a recent series of posts where the title she has an overall wrapper one, there's 10 differences between amateurs and professional analysts. And I think if I had read that when I was 5 years into being an analyst, I would have thought, oh my God, she's crazy. This is ridiculous. I read it now, and there are still a couple things where I'm like, I don't think that's right, so I'm probably wrong. I just don't understand it yet. But reading to actually think through what it means to be an analyst, because there are so many people who get, I think, like the idea of being an analyst, and they're not actually really analysts. So I don't know if that's a good answer to the question.
Well, I think if they're here, coming here is probably a really great start. Being around analytics people, and I think that works. And I think you're going to feel the road in front of you is so much longer than the road you've already traveled, and that feeling will never go away. In fact, it will only increase the distance. The wiser, more experienced you come, the more you realize there is to learn. And so as an analyst, being here, you're already starting to make a difference. Interacting with the community, learning your craft, and overcoming the challenges that we all face around, who's going to listen to me? I'm nobody. Well, why should the CEO of this company take my advice? Those are things we all have to get over in different ways. And probably in a lot of the sessions, you've heard strategies and tips and tricks, and we certainly cover that on the podcast. So thank you for helping us be a little better and be making a little difference and being part of this podcast today. And thank you, Jim, for inviting us. Thank you all for attending and contributing to this episode. Thank you, Mo and Tim, for being my co-hosts. And of course, no show would be complete without a big thank you to Josh Crowhurst, who we're sad couldn't be here with us. He's our producer. And usually we do last calls, but we'd love to hear from you. We're all here for a couple more hours, so seek us out, but you can also find us on the Measure Slack. And what?
I think Mo has to head to the airport.
I'd have to go to an airport, but sure.
You can talk to Mo at the airport, or also we have a LinkedIn page, and we're also on Twitter. But you could probably find us tooling around at some marketing analytics summit somewhere, sometime. And remember, one of the most important ways you can keep making a difference, and I think my two co-hosts would agree with me, Mo and Tim, you can keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Analytics. Oh my God, what the fuck does that even mean?
These are our people. Like, this is how we really know that we're in the right room. But there are some fun facts that you don't know before I ask Michael to come up and introduce everybody. Tim Wilson is a kayaking nature photographer. Mo Kiss is a gardening enthusiast, a new mother, She lives in Sydney, Australia, but has a cat named after her in San Jose, California. And Michael Helbling once bought a couch for $44.
Rock flag and data in Vegas, baby.